And we have a very special guest today who also happens to be a friend of mine, Alexis Biddle. You can say hello, Alexis.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Yeah, I'm Alexis Biddle. I work with 1,000 Friends of Oregon, and I'm actually not too far from Springfield. I'm in Marcola. Yeah.
Cool. Great. Well, thanks for joining everybody. Today, we are here to get more into the nitty-gritty of local decisions. Who decides what, whether it's a committee, a board, council, legislators. A lot of decisions are being made, but we don't always know who's making them and how we can get involved. So Alexis is going to help us walk through some of that. And this is mostly for you, Alexis, but here is our mission at Surfrider and our statement on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we also always take time to do a land acknowledgement. So we can just take a minute to read this. Right, thank you. And so today we're talking about who decides how land is used, how do plans get created and amended, who do we contact if we have concerns, how do we learn about these decisions and get involved? And I couldn't think of anyone better to chime in about this than Alexis, who has a master's in community and regional planning, as well as a law degree. And so welcome, Alexis, the Great Communities Program Director at 1,000 Friends of Oregon. So I'll let you take it from here, Alexis. He has a presentation, but then it's going to just be open to questions from us all. So.
Yeah, and I'll also say, feel free to interrupt me at any time. This presentation, if I went straight through it, would not take very long. So happy to take interruptions if you have questions right at that moment about something I'm saying. And yeah, so I'm Alexis Biddle, and this is Who Decides What? And I work with the organization 1,000 Friends of Oregon. And I'll just start out, well, first I'll give you an overview and then talk a little bit about myself and how I got to work for 1,000 Friends. So just looking, I'm gonna go over what our organization is and does, and then just to briefly touch on all the types of land use decisions that we get involved with. And also, I might be able to answer other questions outside of land use, but I focus on land use. So that's where my strong suit is in terms of being able to describe this type of decision making. And then I'm going to go through some alphabet soup with you all and go through these acronyms that mean different things for different commissions or courts. But I'll start out just by describing, I guess, how I got to work for 1,000 Friends of Oregon. When I was in college, I studied geography and philosophy. And then in my geography class, I was like 20 years old at the time, and I learned that climate change is a big deal and it's probably going to like ruin our future. So I decided that I was going to try to like work in some work related to doing something about climate change. I didn't really know what that meant at first. I thought I was going to go into science and like work on climate science. But then after a while, I realized that like it's not a problem of not understanding climate change enough. It's just that we're not doing anything about it. And so that led me to go to law school after I did some organizing work in Ohio, doing door-to-door canvassing, where we were campaigning against a form of coal mining called mountaintop removal. And I was like knocking on doors for a few months, just asking people to donate to this organization that was fighting mountaintop removal. And as I was doing that, I was like, so I'm knocking on doors, not enjoying this. And I'm just doing this so that lawyers can do their work. Why don't I just go become a lawyer? And so I moved from Ohio to Oregon to go to law school about a decade ago, and ended up at the University of Oregon. And then when I got to law school, I was like, oh, there's not any laws that we can use to like litigate. Like we can't go take people to court if there's no laws to do anything about climate change. So then I started realizing that maybe I should have gone into like policy work instead of trying to become a lawyer. And so I actually dropped out of law school after my first year, and thinking that like I had made a wrong choice. And I became a taxi driver in Eugene, just to like, because I loved Eugene, I didn't want to leave, and my backup degree was a philosophy and geography degree, and that wasn't going anywhere, but I wanted to stay in Eugene, so I became a taxi driver, and I really actually liked that job quite a bit for the short period of time I had it. But one day I was explaining to one of my cab customers who I was taking to the airport, I was like telling him about like, care about climate change, and also like I had some interest in urban design, but I don't really know how it came up in this conversation. But anyways, he said, you ever think about getting a planning degree, or like going back to school to get your planning degree? Because I had explained to him that I had like taken some time off law school. Anyways, that led me to think about, going towards a profession in planning. And then I decided that getting a law degree at the same time, since I was already a third the way through it, might as well finish it. But another thing that I learned from cab driving was the really close connection between some environmental problems and social problems. So for instance, like some of my cab customers, they couldn't afford a car, but they also lived too far away from the grocery store to walk, or they didn't live near a bus. So they ended up having to take a taxi. And that's one of those examples where it's like expensive to be poor. And so they had to add $20 or $40 to every time they would go grocery shopping, just because they couldn't afford a car and lived too far away from their neighborhood grocery store. So that kind of like, well, these people, like, for one, we are very auto dependent. That's horrible. And it's also like huge inequity for us to design our cities in ways that aren't where people can't get what they need. So we don't build enough housing near grocery stores or commercial centers. And our So that started really getting me like focused down, like how can we do cities better. And yeah, so then I went back to school, and then when I was finishing school, I joined the board of a transportation advocacy group called Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. Diane, you should check them out if you're interested in this subject at all. They're a great organization. They advocate around more sustainable transportation in the Eugene Springfield area. And the executive director of that ended up being one of my mentors. And he used to work for this organization called 1,000 Friends of Oregon. And he brainwashed me to convince me that it's the best organization in the world, and that I had to work for them when I graduated. And I was really lucky that they had a job opening like a year after I graduated, and I now work for my dream organization. So I'll tell you a little bit about 1,000 Friends and our history, and then just go into this go in a little bit more detail on these land use decisions. So 1,000 Friends of Oregon was started in 1974 by the governor at the time, or I think he had actually just left being governor. His name is Tom McCall, and he was famous for the beach bill, the bottle bill, the bike bill, and he also signed the Senate Bill 100, which is the state law that 1,000 Friends of Oregon is the watchdog of, basically. The land use system in Oregon is most known for its urban growth boundary. We have the strongest protections in the country around making sure that as our cities grow, we are very, very deliberate about how we grow, and to ensure that we don't expand onto farmland or forest land, like that we protect our resource lands, and really try to make sure that our housing gets built to the maximum extent possible where we already have developed inside our urban areas. And then when we do develop outside of urban areas, we only do so in areas where the soil is the least productive, and only later would we ever think about going into higher quality soils. They passed this law, Senate Bill 100, in 1973, and it was in response to some studies that were done in the 60s and 70s, and these studies showed that Oregon's so at the time agriculture was the #1 industry in Oregon, and they at the rate that property was getting developed inside the Willamette Valley and in southern Oregon, we would run out of effective productive farmland within the next 100 years. So given that we would have undermined the biggest part of our economy, it was a pretty big concern at the time, and that's why we have such a strong land use system. And so another thing that to keep in mind here is that the reason that we have a strong state authority that does this is because if you left local governments to their own devices, they tend, well, for one, there's hundreds of local governments, and they have, some would be good and some would not be good at protecting farmland. But in general, local governments have a lot of local political pressure to do what developers want them to do, which is oftentimes just pave over farmland and make new developments. And so the governor also knew that there would be not enough resources at the state level to be to be effective agency oversight of these city local decisions around planning. And so they created 1,000 Friends of Oregon as the watchdog organization that would take these local governments to court. First we advocate at city council meetings when they're adopting laws. And then if they don't adopt the laws that are compliant with this Senate Bill 100, then we take them to court, or we know attorneys that we work with that will help us achieve that objective. So in the early, yeah.
Is Thousand Friends do you have like a 501 designation? What's the legal structure?
Yeah, we're a 501c3 charitable nonprofit.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're not, even though we were founded by the governor, we are non-governmental in any way. It was not part of his being governor that we were created. Yeah. Okay. So in the early part of our history, we were very litigious, and we were well known throughout the state for suing cities, and we did it hundreds of times. If you look in Oregon's case law, it's like everywhere. 1,000 Friends of Oregon is everywhere, and it really shaped the foundation of Oregon's land use system to have a real meaning to it, and actually be as effective as it is today. But over time, we've also been more collaborative, and we work more on the front end now to help cities adopt things that are going to help them not need to expand on the farmland as much. So it's less litigious than it used to be. And I think I'll stop there if anyone has any questions about 1,000 Friends and what we do, but I can just keep going too. Okay. So I'll get into this presentation, which is not long. So there's land use decisions are made at the local level. And actually, let me back up a second. There was a slide I meant to include, and I didn't. But it kind of goes back to the conversation I said earlier about the reason that we have this the land use system is so strong in our state from the state level. And that's it's related to this concept of home rule. And in Oregon, we have this principle where local governments have the authority to do anything that the state constitution doesn't tell them they can't do, or the federal constitution, which gives them a lot of power. They essentially have the power for protecting the welfare of people, which is a very broad thing that cities can do. But when cities take away, or when states enact statutes that affect the power of local governments, it is effectively taking away home rule power and establishing that power at the state level. So Oregon's land use system, there was a lot of pushback from the city governments that wanted to make these decisions, but they didn't win the day at the legislature, and so that's why there is like land use decisions are made at the local level, but now they're reviewed by the state. But I should have put in the second bullet that the state legislators made that first choice that established Senate Bill 100. And so, but that's like a big overarching, structure in which land use decisions are made, but it's not a land use decision. And yeah, so there essentially are 4 types of land use decisions in most cities. It's up to them to define these, but most cities have types 1 through 4. And the most important thing to know is that type 1 are simple, type 4 are a bigger deal. They make they usually encompass many properties, and a type 1 decision, for instance, might be like it's usually just up to the planning director, and it's an administrative decision. So if you're just putting say a new facade on your mailbox or something, that would be something that the planning director can just be like, yep, they meet the requirements of the zoning code. No, we don't have to go to a public hearing and do a thorough review of this. Like in my expert professional judgment, this person, their application to change their mailbox looks good. So it's usually like really simple decisions. And they also don't require any notice. So usually if within say 100, or maybe it's like 600 feet of a house, if a city's going to do something larger, like do a rezone, they need to notify the neighbors within 600 feet of a house. And that varies by the cities as well. So it depends on where you are, how much notice they give. Excuse me one second, I'm just gonna drink water. And yeah, so type 1 decisions don't require any notice, and they're very simple administrative decisions. And type 4, they usually go to planning commissions, and they also go to city councils. And city councils, usually there's a string of meetings where the planning commission will make a recommendation, and the city council does the final adoption for approving things that are things like large rezones, or like large developments that are following what's called the discretionary track, which means that there's some subjective elements of whether a application meets the criteria. And yeah, so basically it goes to planning commission and then to city council. And then there is here's where we get into the acronym soup. There's the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And then in a moment, I'm going to talk about the Land Conservation and Development Commission. So there's DLCD and LCDC. And they're related to each other, but they're not the same thing. Basically, the LCDC is the board of directors of DLCD, and that's the state. DLCD is the agency. But if a city is doing a large amendment to their comprehensive plan, which is, the comprehensive plan is like the constitution of zoning law, where if they allow something in the comprehensive plan, allows any type of use that is less intensive in their zoning code. So the zoning code, let's say you allow, this is the concept of like cumulative zoning, and say that a comprehensive plan allows in a certain area to be zoned for apartments. if the zoning code could allow apartments in that area because that is the most intensive use. It could also allow single family home or duplex because that's less intensive than an apartment use. Contrary to that, if a comprehensive plan had a zone that was only for duplexes or single family homes, you couldn't allow in the zoning code an apartment complex because that's more intensive of a use in terms of like number of dwelling units per acre. So I say all that because the comprehensive plan is like the Constitution, the most important part, or it has the highest authority for zoning decisions in a city. And if a city wants to change their comprehensive plan, they need to tell the state that they're doing it, and they need to provide notice to the public. And these are called post-acknowledgement plan amendments, PAPAs. And the that would tell us if a city is, for example, going to expand its urban growth boundary. They need to submit a PAPA, and the PAPA needs to show that they meet all 18 goals or 19 goals of Oregon's land use system. And I'm not going to get into all the goals, don't worry, but there's 19 of them. 4 of them would be of extra interest to you all. They're the coastal goals, and they only apply on the coast. But they deal with like estuary protection, beach and dune like preservation, things like that. And honestly, I don't know a whole lot about that, but someone you might want to talk to, or if you're interested in learning more, it's called the Oregon Coastal Alliance, otherwise known as ORCA, and they're an affiliate organization of ours. Cameron LaFollette is their executive director, and she is amazing, and she knows everything you could know about zoning on the coast. So if you have zoning specific coastal questions, she's your gal.
Yeah, we work with her quite a bit.
Good.
Any coastal land use stuff, we partner with Cameron a lot, and she
good.
is a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, she is, definitely. So going back to DLCD, they publish these post-acknowledgement plan amendments, and that kind of gives us a clue about if a city's trying to do something that we want to pay attention to, like urban growth boundary expansion, things like that. DLCD also provides technical assistance for smaller cities because some cities are small enough that they don't have their own planner, and they need technical assistance from the department. So that's good for local governments. And they also, after a city has adopted a post-acknowledgement plan amendment, when they have the resources, they review the local codes and to check if they're compliant with the statewide land use goals. And then they take those reviews and they give them to the Land Conservation and Development Commission. And if a post acknowledgement plan amendment, a PAPA, doesn't meet all the goals, then the Land Conservation and Development Commission has the authority to tell them they did it wrong and they need to go back and do their homework to get it right. And sometimes that means they are asking for too much land, or they don't supply enough land for housing, or they don't have the right infrastructure in place to be building out the way that the city wants to do. And so the Land Conservation and Development Commission, they take these reviews and review them, and then but that's only when a city takes an action. If a city fails to do something, like if they went for years without trying to make sure that they're building enough housing for meeting the needs of people of all incomes in their community, you can a citizen or a resident or a organization can ask the department or the Land Conservation and Development Commission. I get it wrong too a lot. But the person or an organization can ask for an enforcement action And that is where if there's a failure to act, the commission can force the local government to act. And essentially, if they're being very obstinate, they can even go in and write the land use code for the city. So it's like taking complete power away from the cities. And then finally, they also do what is weirdly known as acknowledgement, where if a city, if they hear a review of a city's plan amendment, and no one appeals it, and they don't appeal it, then the plan is deemed acknowledged, and that's when you know a plan is safe and like it's not going to go under any new legal review in the future. So there's also the Land Conservation Development Commission reviews for acknowledgement, but there's also a special court called the Land Use Board of Appeals, and that court was created shortly after the land use system was created, because our land use system is fairly complex, and they realized that many of the local courts and circuit courts weren't doing a great job at reviewing them consistently. So they created a court that focused specifically on it. And this is where if there's a legislative action by a city where they are, say, doing an urban growth boundary expansion, where you can appeal their decision. And usually what will happen if the city is in fact wrong, they either get a remand, or in very rare cases, they get a reversal. But a remand is when a city is forced to reconsider, and it usually has to go back to the planning commission and then back to city council to get it right. And then a reversal is what it sounds like. It's where the court says, city, this is wrong, and not only is it wrong, it's so wrong that we're going to make the decision for you. So if a builder of affordable housing got rejected by the city, and it was clear that they met all of the criteria and should have been allowed to build their affordable housing project, but they were denied anyways, the court can say, no, you need to allow this, and they don't have to go back through that process. So yeah, I had nothing on this slide because I just wanted to mention all these decisions can go to courts of appeals, such as the Oregon Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court of Oregon. And then ultimately the Supreme Court of the United States, but that's rare. It has happened though.
I have a LUBA question.
Yeah.
So this sounds familiar to Jean, because we have actually Surfrider, the Coos Bay chapter, has been involved in a LUBA appeal around our LNG campaign. And so we were involved with a second appeal. So the decision was appealed and then remanded back to the county. And then we, along with Oregon Shores Conservation Coalition, sent it to LUBA again, and then it got remanded again. And so I'm curious, like how many times can something get
it can
remanded? Just like forever until someone takes it to the Court of Appeals?
Yeah, ultimately, usually the Supreme Court would be the last stop for a case, but usually the Court of Appeals tends to be the last stop. But it can take very long period of time. I know of one in the city of McMinnville. We were involved in litigation that took over 20 years. Yeah. So, and this isn't even, this is in the field of law, environmental law. This isn't even like the Washington versus the United States case is a case about salmon in Washington, and that case has been ongoing for over 40 years. And
it's wild. That's our Surfrider's CEO always reminds us of this quote for a gentleman that used to be in the California Coastal Commission, and I'm going to get the quote wrong, but essentially it's like, the work of conservation organizations never end, because one loss that we have can make permanent impacts that you can't recover from, whereas the developers, they just need one win, and like the damage is done. And so it's like you would constantly, it's kind of exhausting, but it's like we have to stay vigilant, and that's why it's really important for like these trainings and having you here and teaching everyone how we can kind of watch for these things and what the kind of avenues are for taking actions. It's like we constantly need to keep watching these things.
Yeah, totally. And another kind of flip side where it is, whereas the cost for like environmental organizations, there's like a flip side for like developers that build affordable housing sometimes have to give up building an affordable housing project because people appeal affordable housing being built near them, and then it ends up costing them so much in legal fees that they can't build the affordable housing anymore. So it's unfortunate that happens in kind of both directions sometimes with development. But we're working right now at the state level to make it easier to build affordable housing. So hopefully those efforts will become easier in the future. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that things go through the courts of appeal. And then one thing I know almost nothing about, but I think I can't go without mentioning the Coastal Zone Management Act, something that I think it's done at the state level. I bet Bree or Anna knows more than I do, or maybe you do, maybe both of you know as well. But the Coastal Zone Management Act is a big deal when it comes to zoning on the coast. But that's all I can say so, with any degree of confidence. And other than that, that's all I got. And also my job title changed. I forgot. This was an old, I stole this from an old deck. But I'll stop sharing.
Okay, thanks, Alexis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry for the alphabet soup of acronyms and a lot of boring technical information. I'm happy to have a more human conversation.
Yeah, but that's the type of thing that, affects all of us, but we're not really aware of because we see that alphabet soup and get a little scared about it. So just learning it piece by piece makes it much more accessible and digestible, because it's stuff that we should all know about, care about.
It's important.
So, Jean, did you have a question?
It was really fascinating, Alexis. This story of how you got to be with 1,000 friends.
Yeah.
And that really, I just want to say that's a great way to start. It really, shows your humanity and what you're all about, particularly in the alphabet soup realm, of which most people, even though I'm in Surfrider and I'm a kind of super nerd, this is really helpful for me. And I guess
Good.
I guess I might ask, so is this more about understanding when we're trying to follow an issue of like who's making what type of decision, or where it's at, or how much can an ordinary person like me, an ordinary citizen, kind of be involved with DLCD and LUBA and LCDC?
Great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is, if you are interested, I would highly recommend getting you can get an alert from DLCD. They have a notification system, and I can share the link with Anna and Bree, and they can make sure you get it. Actually, I might be able to just look it up while we're here and then put it in the chat. But DLCD has a notification system that will, you can click off which jurisdictions you want notice for. I get them every day. It's nauseating. There's about 10 a day around the state. But if you just want like your county or your city, then you're only going to get an email like maybe a few times a year, depending on the county or city, how big it is and what type of how many decisions they make. But they'll give you the name of the planner to contact, and a brief summary of what they're proposing to do. and this is for those larger type of decisions, the post-acknowledgement plan amendments. And if you contact the planner, you can ask them for like a staff report, which they always, anytime a planning commissioner or city council is making a big zoning decision like this, they get a staff report that will thoroughly explain it like a 5-year-old would need. So it helps my job be a lot easier. I get these 5-year-old explanations for for what's going on. So I'd recommend doing that. Then there's also monthly meetings at, or I'm sorry, I think they're bi-monthly. The LCDC, the commission, they have bi-monthly meetings, and they are actually sometimes very interesting discussions. You can always call into those or video in, but you can also go in person, and they travel around the state, which is kind of cool. So they often are, it's like every other one is in Salem, but they are, they go out to Condon or Newport or plenty of places. So I'd recommend checking their website like maybe once a year to see if there's one near you, or if there's anything on their agendas that are interesting. They often have some pretty interesting conversations going on at the commission.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I'll just put in a plug also. We've talked a lot about contacting your elected officials or contacting committee members. And so if there are local decisions being made, kind of keeping an eye on planning commission agendas, or checking in with the planning commissioners or city councilors. Everyone on this call, I believe, is in city limits for our participants, but county commissioners as well, just to kind of stay in touch on decisions that are being made, or finding groups in your area that are monitoring those types of issues, like especially on the coast. Orca, which Alexis mentioned, has a newsletter you can sign up for, or if you're on social media, you can follow their Facebook page to keep up to date on coastal land use issues.
And I just dropped in the chat a link to the there's a little tab at the bottom where there's a login, and then below the login it says create new account. If you want to get a subscription to the notices in your community, create an account, and then when you create an account, it will ask you what jurisdictions you want. What jurisdictions you want to.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and actually, just in case, because this looks like it may be a little bit different than last time, you can also check online. There's, I just sent another link, and that I got to that second link from, or I got to that first link from the second link, and that is like gives you a little bit more context, and you can also check online what's going on with notices around the state. That's in case I'm wrong about if that filling out that thing will get you what I was saying it will.
Alexis, do you have thoughts on what to do if like you're just out for a walk or a drive and you see something of concern, and you don't know if somebody's doing anything about it or not, but maybe a path is being blocked or something, some weird land use thing is happening and your ears perk up? Who would you contact? I
always cut straight to the chase and call planning directors. They're usually very friendly, and in most cities they'll be able to answer the line directly. So if you just look up your planning director, ask them, because it can be confusing going into a planning department, and sometimes some cities like Springfield probably has, I don't know, 5 or more planners, and you don't know who's who or like which person to ask. But the planning director kind of is sitting at the top, and they know who to send questions to. So unless it's very clear from like a planning website or something, I would just contact your planning director, and they're always really friendly and happy to answer questions like that.
Thank you. And kind of follow up, we're going to talk more on Thursday about joining citizens committees that are involved with government, but is there room in the land use planning world for citizens to be more just actively involved?
Yeah, there's actually at the state level, I think they're recruiting members right now to the citizen, I think it's called the Citizen Advisory Committee. Let me see if I can find that. There's also there's frequent openings on local planning commissions, which are a lot of work, but it makes a huge difference in your community. And by a lot of work, it can be up to like a city in Eugene. I know some planning commissioners spend 20 hours a week reviewing their materials. So it's nothing small. I think I found, loading slowly, but I think I found yeah, I found a link for open positions on this committee. If you're interested in joining at the state level with LCDC, and I would imagine this isn't a super burdensome commitment. It might be once a month or less. And there's also, if you're interested in transportation work, there's a lot of citizen committees at ODOT.
And do you need any sort of prerequisites to join those committees?
No, just an interest or passion, and they usually have, I mean, some of them might be competitive, but I think in a lot of cases they're pretty uncontested. So if you're just interested and don't sound like a jerk, you should be good.
It looks like this one, the Citizen Involvement Advisory Committee for LCDC, has tons of openings, and some of them are at large and some of them represent specific districts.
Mm-hmm.
They go by congressional districts.
Yeah, good point.
But we heard last Thursday, we had a county commissioner joining us, and that was her closing thought was, we're always recruiting people for committees.
Yeah.
So we always need committee members at all levels of government.
Yeah, definitely.
And I was going to give a little plug for the Coos Bay chapter is hosting Jay Senewald from Oregon State Parks on Thursday evening to give a presentation about ocean shore management. So more on the beach side of things. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, Jay, who's the one who actually approves permits for the ocean shore alterations, he'll be talking, and gets really interesting with land use, like especially trying to figure out that line of where the ocean shore actually is, the statutory line. It's all very confusing and complex. And that can make it challenging to know who to contact for coastal issues, depending on where it is on the beach or private property or other public landowners.
Great. Any other questions while we have Alexis with us? I've been wondering how your Luli training has been going. Alexis has put on a series, Land Use Law Institute. If you wouldn't mind.
Close. Land Use Leadership Initiative.
That's what it is.
And yeah, we do run this program. It's regional, so we try to move it around the state every year. And we usually have one in Portland every year, but then we move one around elsewhere. And the one right now is in the Eugene, Springfield, and actually Corvallis and Albany. Those three cities have folks on it. But we meet every 3 weeks for 9 sessions, so it's basically 6 months of meeting, and we talk about each land use goal. And I unfortunately don't think we'll ever get to the coast because it's so sparsely populated. Although maybe with the new Zoom world, we could have a coastal specific one, and maybe we should do it jointly with Surfrider and Orca.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that could be something we could talk about in the future. I'd definitely be open to it. But anyways, we talked about the land use system and teach people how to be better advocates, basically.
Yeah, I think a virtual one would be really awesome so that way people from the entire coast could participate, and maybe we could even have a few like satellite in-person networking things at least.
That is a great idea. I'm like, wheels starting to turn.
Yeah.
Anna's already planning it. All right.
I mean, that is the great thing about Zoom. It makes that seem so much more accessible.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Jean, did you have a question?
I do. I have another question for you, Alexis. So what's the most surprising, I'd say the most surprising thing, you get a career and then you find out something that really surprises. So what's something or a couple things that you found?
Well, to be honest, the biggest surprise, or at least the thing that I was most naive about, was I thought that like going into environmental work, I would be working like with progressives, but I ended up finding out that I'm actually fighting progressives a lot on a lot of issues when it comes to housing, where there's a lot of attitudes in the progressive movement where people think that building housing is a bad idea, where if you're only looking at it from an environmental lens, it can, but even from an environmental lens, it's better to build housing in places where people need it than expecting people to drive, because like housing is not a form of birth control, and people are going to keep living somewhere, and they just would end up having to drive from somewhere else to get to where they're going. So you end up spending more in carbon emissions. But a lot of people don't believe that. So, and a lot of progressive people don't believe that. So that has been a surprise to me, is that I'm spending more time than I thought I would arguing with progressive people. What's another surprise? Also, people in decision-making positions are not all that with it sometimes. It's kind of scary, like the level of understanding that people make big, important decisions with at the local government. So that's why it's so important to get involved and make sure that you're holding their feet to the flames, so that they actually are making informed choices.
Wow. Thank you.
That is a great note to end on, right? We are probably often more informed than the decision makers, so that's extra impetus to get involved.
Yeah, totally.
Great. Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Alexis, and for participating, Jean and Diane and Bree. This was great. Always learn so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes.
It's so nice to meet both of you, all four of you, but both of you especially.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you again, Bree and Anna, for just doing this kick-ass program. Oh, am I allowed to say that on the program?
Definitely.
On Surfrider channels, we allow it.
Yeah. All right. Well, enjoy the beautiful day, everybody. Hope to see you tomorrow night for our state training, and then Thursday for our final brown bag session.
Thank you.
You're in for a treat if you go on Thursday. I know the guy.
Yeah. I'm
so
calling
excited.
on my Eugene local activist people to come join us. So
All right. Take care.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
All
Thanks,
right.
Alexis.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.